Chapter 1931. Li Jianyue's innocent and cute words made the adults around them laugh. Li Xiqing deliberately put on a straight face and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Don't be rude." However, Li Jianyue wasn't afraid at all. She was grinning from ear to ear. Li Mosen pulled Li Jianyue and said, "Ursu, let's go back first. Daddy has to take care of mommy and little brother here. Let's go back and play with little Su." Nanny Rong also came up and said, "Ursu, let's go. Don't make trouble here." Li Jianyue was a little reluctant, but she still pouted and said, "Okay, then when will Daddy and Mommy come home?" "Nanny Rong, why don't you stay here and teach Xiqing?" "Mom, you can bring the children directly back to the old mansion." Su Qianxi's voice was soft as she looked at Qin Shuhua. "Yes, Mom, I think so too." Qin Shuhua heard that and nodded. "Okay, in that case, Nanny Rong can stay here. I'll bring the two children back first." After the discussion, the place was much quieter. Nanny Rong smiled and looked at Li Xiqing. "The children's skin is more tender. Be gentle." Li Xiqing's movements were very gentle. When he heard Nanny Rong's words, he didn't dare to use any force. Nanny Rong couldn't stand watching him being so careful. She said, "Let me do it. Watch me. You'll be able to learn it next time." There was a training center for parents before, but Li Xiqing was busy with work and it wasn't his first child, so he hadn't been there. One reason was that he didn't have time to come again, and the other was that he was embarrassed. Nanny Rong's movements were very smooth and looked gentle and fast. Li Xiqing watched carefully. Su Qianxi looked at her man and her eyes softened. When Li Jianxian and Li Jianyue spoke, Li Xiqing was not by her side. Although he didn't say it, Su Qianxi knew that he must be very regretful. This time, the harder he tried to make it up to her, the more Su Qianxi felt guilty. Back then, Li Xiqing disappeared for 4 years because he wanted to protect her. Li Xiqing seemed to feel Su Qianxi's gaze and looked over. Her dark, almond-shaped eyes curved slightly. Then, she turned her head and watched Nanny Rong's movements. "Did you see it clearly?" Nanny Rong glanced at him. Li Xiqing nodded and said, "I think so. I'll try." Little Moyun's eyes were wide open as he stared at Li Xiqing. Li Xiqing couldn't help but reach out and touch his little face. "Call me Daddy." Little Moyun immediately opened his mouth, and his face turned red. Then, he opened his mouth and burst into tears. Su Qianxi laughed out loud, but Li Xiqing panicked and said, "Why does this child cry?" Nanny Rong tried not to laugh. "That's what kids do. Go on." Li Xiqing wiped his little butt and carefully put a diaper on it. Nanny Rong couldn't stand it anymore. "Hurry up. How's the class going?" Sweating, Li Xiqing took a deep breath and tried to move faster. But in the end, she was still afraid of hurting the child, so she couldn't get up no matter what. Perhaps little Moyun was tired from crying. After a while, he closed his eyes and fell asleep with tear stains on his face. Finally putting the diaper on, Li Xiqing wiped his hands, his face covered with sweat. Nanny Rong said, "Put on the child's clothes. Don't let him catch a cold." Li Xiqing did as he was told. Although it was clothes, it was actually a layer of swaddling clothes. "I have to explain that I was out the whole day and when I came back, I realized that 60 chapters had been deleted. Because it was an anti-pornography campaign, the deleted chapters should be sexual ones." Chapter 1932. He put the child on the small bed next to him and asked Nanny Rong to take care of him. Only then could Li Xiqing wipe his sweat. Su Qianxi still didn't look too good. Li Xiqing sat by her bed with a little heartache and said, "You've worked hard, my wife." Su Qianxi pursed her lips and smiled. "You've worked hard too." Hearing that, Li Xiqing blushed inexplicably. He coughed and said, "Are you tired? Sleep for a while." Su Qianxi smiled and responded softly. Nanny Rong saw that and said, "What are you sleeping for? Eat something first and preserve your strength." Otherwise, you'll be exhausted. Then, she picked up the tonic soup and said, "Have some soup first." "Sir, feed madam some." "I don't want to drink it." Su Qianxi looked at Nanny Rong. "I'm sleepy." "No, you must drink it." Nanny Rong was rarely so firm and strict. "If you don't drink it, don't even think about sleeping." Seeing Nanny Rong like this, Su Qianxi had no choice but to sit up. After drinking some soup, Su Qianxi couldn't stand it anymore and fell asleep on the bed. Seeing her asleep, Li Xiqing stood up and walked over to the child. Looking at little Moyon's sleeping face, his mood quietly started to become better. His son was born, and he had watched him. Honey, I want to eat something sour and spicy." "Oh Ming. You bastard, you're hiding my ice cream again." B*tcho, where's my waist pad? Oh Ming had been very busy recently. It was said that pregnant women were difficult to handle, and he had experienced it firsthand. Not only did her taste change, but her temper was also volatile. Oh Ming couldn't handle this kind of situation at all. The O residents had sent an extra nanny. Oh Ming had to go to the company during the day and come back at night to accompany his wife. It was fine when Yu Lily was in a good mood, but when she was in a bad mood, Oh Ming didn't have a good time. Honey, where's my candy?" Yu Lily had lost something for the umpteenth time, and then looked at Oh Ming with a face full of grievance. Oh Ming was used to it. He looked at her and said, "You can't eat candy. You have to exercise more." Before she was pregnant, she was only 40 pounds at her fattest. With a height of 1.6 meters, this weight was quite thin. But after getting pregnant, not only did her belly get bigger, but her whole body also swelled up like a balloon. Now Yu Lily weighed 110 kilograms. Her whole face was round and she had a big belly. It was hard to imagine that she used to be thin. "The last few times you went for a prenatal checkup, the doctor told you to exercise more. Your blood sugar is a little high, so you're not allowed to eat sweets." Yu Lily looked at him and pouted as she asked, "Do you think I'm fat?" In the past, when she was skinny, he despised her for being too skinny. Now that she was fat, he despised her for being fat. Could they still play happily? When Oh Ming heard that, he snorted. "Why did you ask if you knew?" He pulled his wife over and said, "I've fed you until you're full. Come, let's take a walk outside. Don't eat any more." "But I want to eat candy, just one." "No. At a time like this, I can't spoil you. Mom is coming over later, and it'll be time for dinner. Let's go for a walk first." Yu Lily's eyes lit up. She smiled and said, "Yeah. When is Mom coming?" Chapter 1933. Yu Lily took Oh Ming's arm and said, "Oh, she is your mother. Since she is your mother, she is my mother. Why are you jealous? It's so boring." Oh Ming glared at Yu Lily, but soon turned his head and said, "I have to ask Mom to make less delicious food later. It will be difficult to give birth." "No," Yu Lily said indifferently. "Anyway, I am ready for a cesarean section. It is very painful to have a natural birth." Qianqian had a natural birth this time. "I heard that it is much more painful than a cesarean section." Oh Ming glanced at her, and his lips curled up slightly. Because they were all pregnant, several expectant mothers had created a WeChat group. Among them, Yu Lily was the group leader. There were 4 women in the group: Yi Yuyu, Su Qianxi, Qiu Manyu, and Yu Lily. Qiu Manyu was a military doctor, so she didn't spend much time in the group. However, Su Qianxi often shared her mother's happiness with them, as well as the things that a mother needed to pay attention to. Yu Lily was very open in the group. After listening to Su Qianxi and Yi Yuyu's teachings, she didn't take Oh Ming's warning seriously at all. Oh Ming was helpless, but he couldn't help but feel happy for her. Although she came a little late, she was still Yu Lily's best friend, wasn't she? In the end, Oh Ming dragged Yu Lily out of the door. Although it was a walk, Yu Lily didn't want to walk at all. Her footsteps were very slow. Oh Ming waited beside her, and he also looked very slow. Yu Lily was waiting for him impatiently, and then she would ask to go home and wait for Qiao Ziqing. However, Ming not only didn't show any impatience, but also looked at Yu Lily with interest. He raised his eyebrows slightly and asked, "Why don't you walk?" Yu Lily pouted and walked slowly. She didn't want to walk at all. Looking at Ming, she said, "Honey, I am tired." "But you walked less than 300 meters, Ming said. "Ah, we walked out of the house, and it is a full 500 meters. It is so far. How long do you want me to walk?" Yu Lily said bitterly. Her face was wrinkled, and she looked at Ming pitifully. Ming stood beside her, looking very calm. "No, it's only about 200 meters. Let's go." "I don't want to go. My legs are sore." Seeing Yu Lily acting so coquettishly, Ming couldn't bear to see her like this. He said, "Let's head home." Yu Lily's previously bitter face immediately brightened up. She said, "All right, hubby. Mom should be here soon. Let's go home and wait for her." With that, she let go of Ming's hand and walked home with light footsteps. Where was the look of someone who looked like he was about to die after taking 2 steps? Ming stared at her back and followed her helplessly. "Didn't you say you were tired?" Yes, so I have to hurry home and sit down, or I will be exhausted." Yu Lily looked serious and looked at him with a bright smile. Yu Lily was out of breath as she quickened her pace. The baby in her belly seemed to be a little unhappy and gave her a kick in the belly. Yu Lily stood still and looked at her belly. She exclaimed in surprise, Ming, come and see. Your son is kicking me." Ming wasn't far away. When he heard that, he quickly ran over and shouted, "Where?" Chapter 1934. Ha ha. Yu Lily looked at Ming gloatingly. When Ming saw Yu Lily's expression, he gritted his teeth and said, "If you give birth to a son, I'll beat you up." "Humph, if you dare to beat my son, I'll beat you up." Yu Lily put her hands on her hips and looked at Ming with arrogance. As she spoke, she swaggered in the direction of her home like a local tyrant. After the new year, the weather was particularly good. For the past few days, the sun had been shining brightly. The weather was clear, and Yu Lily's mood was naturally better. Recently, Ming had strictly controlled her diet. He even restricted her from eating more than 1 piece of meat. Therefore, Yu Lily looked forward to Qiao Ziqing's visit every day to break her taboos. When Qiao Ziqing arrived, she led Nanny Zhang to prepare a large table of dishes for Yu Lily with a smile. Yu Lily ate with great enthusiasm. Although most of the dishes were Nanny Zhang's handiwork, without Qiao Ziqing, Yu Lily would not have been able to eat so much. After eating, Ming wanted to take Yu Lily for a walk. Yu Lily felt a wave of discomfort in her stomach. At first, she thought she wanted to go to the bathroom. After hiding in the bathroom of the room and sitting for a while, he felt that something was wrong. The pain in her stomach was getting worse, and Yu Lily couldn't take it anymore. She held on to the door and walked out, shouting, "Help!" Everyone was busy working, and Ming was talking to Qiao Ziqing. When he heard Yu Lily's cry, he immediately panicked. He quickly ran up and saw that Yu Lily was about to cry. He asked, "What's wrong?" "My stomach hurts." Yu Lily looked at Ming with a pitiful look and clutched her stomach. Ming was shocked. He quickly went up to hold her and asked, "Is the baby about to go into labor?" "But it's not the due date yet." Nanny Zhang heard the movement from below and ran up. She said, "Lie down first." "Don't worry." "Why are you lying down? What if you give birth later?" "It won't. There are still 7 or 8 days before the due date. The closer it is to the due date, the lower the fetal position will be. It's normal to have a stomach ache. Lie down for a while. If it still hurts later, we'll go to the hospital." "Really?" Ming found it a little mysterious. Nanny Zhang glared at him and said, "I have experience. You can't go wrong trusting me." "Yes." Some things, it was always right to believe in the older generation. He helped Yu Lily lie down. As expected, Yu Lily quickly fell asleep. Oh Ming breathed a sigh of relief, but he was also speechless. Walking out, Nanny Zhang looked at Oh Ming and said, I was right, wasn't I? Yes, I fell asleep. Oh Ming laughed bitterly and took out a cigarette. Thank you. Nanny Zhang glanced at him and said, don't stand on ceremony with me. But it's best if you don't smoke anymore. It's not good for pregnant women and children. Well, I don't smoke. Oh Ming put the cigarette in his mouth and sat down on the sofa without lighting it. After smoking for so many years, it was impossible for him to quit just like that. But for the sake of his wife and children, Oh Ming had been much more well-behaved recently. Mrs. has gone back. Young master, the next time Mrs. comes, don't let her buy so many ingredients. It's not a waste, but it's not good to let Lily eat too much. Chapter 1935. Nanny Zhang glanced at her and said, hurry up and coax her. The labor pains before childbirth are also very uncomfortable, especially for those who have never given birth before. I'm afraid she can't take it. Oh Ming had already stood up and walked over. Yu Lily was lying on her side on the bed with a painful look. When she saw Oh Ming coming over, she said, I think I'm going to give birth. Honey, I'm bleeding down there. Oh Ming was shocked. He looked down and saw some bloodstains. Not many, but there were some. Yu Lily wanted to get up, but her stomach hurt badly. Oh Ming picked her up and hurried downstairs. Nanny Zhang, help me get the key. I'll take her to the hospital. Yu Lily was wearing a pink cotton nightgown. Nanny Zhang took a look and saw the patch of red behind Yu Lily. She exclaimed, oh, there's blood. She found the car keys for Oh Ming and opened the door for him. Hurry up, it'll be troublesome if your water breaks. Yu Lily's stomach hurt badly. Didn't you say that the due date is still a few days away? It's only a few days away. The baby is full term, so it doesn't matter which day it is. Nanny Zhang comforted him and helped him open the car door. After letting his wife in, Nanny Zhang said, I'll go and lock the door. I'll take care of Lily. Let's go to the hospital together. A crude man like you won't know anything. All right. Oh Ming agreed without even thinking about it. After Nanny Zhang locked the door, she hurried to the back seat. The pain in Yu Lily's stomach became more and more unbearable. With a bitter face, she said, I'm never going to have another child again. Bah, bah, bah. Nanny Zhang smacked her lips and said, don't say such things now. Don't scare the child too much to come out. Yu Lily grimaced. But, it was really painful. It hurt so much. Halfway down the road, Yu Lily suddenly felt water flowing down. But strangely, it didn't hurt as much now. Yu Lily leaned on Nanny Zhang, gasping for breath. There was a layer of sweat on her forehead. Oh, young master, oh, hurry up. If you don't hurry up, how can I make it in time? My water has broken. What? Oh Ming's face suddenly changed. He accelerated the car to its maximum speed. In the blink of an eye, he had already run several red lights. He didn't know where the information came from, but it was almost instinctive and deep-rooted. He believed that if her water broke and she hadn't been sent to the hospital, then it was a very serious matter. Oh Ming's heart was getting more and more flustered. He had to drive fast, but he had to drive steadily. When they finally arrived at the hospital, Oh Ming carried Yu Lily out. His face was pale with fright. He yelled, how can there be so much blood? Yu Lily's nightgown was stained red. It looked bloody and wretched. Red liquid continued to drip down from the Ferrari and flowed down to the ground. Yu Lily's expression didn't look too good. Suddenly, Oh Ming thought of the past. Didn't the television dramas and movies she watched with Xiao Ziqing when she was young have the female lead bleed to death during childbirth? Don't worry, this isn't blood. How can it not be blood? Do you think I'm blind? Oh Ming roared. He ran to the hospital with a pale face and shouted, "Doctor, doctor." When he was sent to the emergency room, the nurse took a look and wrote down a record. She said, "Send her to the delivery room to open the cervix first." Then she looked at Oh Ming and asked, "How long has her water broken?" Chapter 1936. Hearing such fierce words, the nurse was speechless. She explained helplessly, "Mr. O, it's not all blood. The pregnant woman's water broke and mixed with blood looks a little scary, but in fact, it's normal." When Oh Ming heard that, his brows furrowed deeply. He was skeptical. "And your wife's is relatively normal. There's nothing special. Don't worry, leave it to us. You wait here." As she spoke, she had already registered and turned to follow Yu Lily's bed. Nanny Zhang felt helpless and amused and said, "Master O, you sit here. Women don't give birth so quickly." "No, I want to go in." "No, it's bad luck for a man to go in when a woman gives birth." Nanny Zhang held Oh Ming back. "You can't go in." "Why not?" "When second brother's wife gave birth, second brother also squatted in there for a long time." Oh Ming was not convinced and shouted, "How can that be the same? Second brother's wife is having a second child. When second brother's assistant gave birth, her man also went in with her? That's because she didn't have an elder to guide her. She doesn't know that it's actually not good for men." Oh Ming asked, "Nanny Zhang, why did I bring you here?" Nanny Zhang was speechless. By the time Qiao Ziqing arrived, a long time had passed. Oh Ming had signed the papers, and his heart was burning with anxiety. Nanny Zhang held him back. When she saw Qiao Ziqing coming over, she said, "Madam, quickly stop Master O. This guy always wants to go in. How can a man go in when a woman is giving birth?" Hearing that, Qiao Ziqing immediately went up to Oh Ming and said, "No, you can't go in. If you go in and distract Lily, if the child doesn't come naturally, it's all your fault." Hearing that, Oh Ming finally became obedient. But soon, Oh Ming began to refute and said, "Then why can second brother go in to accompany his wife to give birth? His wife gave birth to a second child, so she has experience and strong willpower. Your wife gave birth to a first child." Qiao Ziqing analyzed the situation seriously and looked at Oh Ming. "And don't you know your wife? Maybe she was born fine. What if you go in and she starts wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf? When that happens, she'll really be distracted. How are you going to play?" Oh Ming was convinced. He pursed his lips and said nothing. Staring at the door, Oh Ming sat on a chair outside. He waited from afternoon to night. With a cigarette dangling from his mouth, Oh Ming was extremely anxious. Staring at the door of the delivery room, she stood up repeatedly and paced back and forth. Looking at the time, it was already past 8 in the evening. Oh Ming felt more and more uneasy and said, "Why isn't it done yet?" Nanny Zhang glared at him and said, "How can a woman give birth in a hurry? Some women give birth for a week." 1 week? Oh Ming's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, you really don't believe me. There really was a woman who gave birth for a week. It was a little uncomfortable, but at least she gave birth to the child. How are you going to eat and drink for a week? How does she get up?" Oh Ming couldn't imagine it. Doesn't the pregnant woman feel uncomfortable? Chapter 1937. Oh Ming was speechless. Actually, he wasn't in a hurry, but Nanny Zhang's words made him even more nervous. Oh Ming took the cigarette out of his mouth and twirled it in his palm. "It's been so long. Is you Lily hungry? Don't worry. She can't even wait to give birth. She won't feel hungry at all." Nanny Zhang's words made Oh Ming feel even more anxious. Qiao Ziqing saw Oh Ming's expression and said, "Nanny Zhang, don't scare him. Lily is in good health. Who knows, she might give birth soon. Don't worry." "Yeah," Oh Ming replied calmly. His pacing back and forth became more and more irritated. They waited until 9 p.m., when Oh Huijin came over and said, "It looks like she won't be out for a while. Hurry up and eat something. Your health is more important." Xiao Ziqing glanced at Oh Ming and saw that he was extremely nervous. Oh Ming clenched his fists and paced back and forth. It was as if he hadn't heard Oh Huijin's words. Xiao Ziqing called out to him, and Oh Ming suddenly raised his head. "Oh Ming, go eat first." Oh Ming glanced at them and said, "You guys go ahead. I'm not hungry. I'll wait here for you Lily to come out." Wait for you Lily, not wait for the child. It seemed like there were only a few words different, but the meaning was worlds apart. Xiao Ziqing was both relieved and distressed. Oh Huijin said, "We'll bring some back for you later." "No need. I'll wait for her to come out and eat together." Oh Ming glanced at them. "Mom, is it really painful for a woman to give birth?" "It's very painful." Xiao Ziqing glanced at him. "Humph, you didn't feel any pain when your mother gave birth to you. Now that your wife is giving birth, you're like this. How realistic." It was a simple joke. Oh Ming couldn't laugh at all. He twitched his lips and waved his hand. "Hurry up and go. I'll let you know when she comes out." Oh Huijin and his wife saw this and left with Nanny Zhang. Oh Ming paced back and forth outside many times. It was not until 11:00 in the evening that the door of the delivery room was opened. Oh Ming's eyes lit up. He quickly went up and asked, "How is it?" "Congratulations, it's a little princess." "Little princess?" "Little princess." Oh Ming was ecstatic and shouted, "A girl? Princess? My God." He stepped forward and took a look at the baby in the swaddling clothes, but he quickly looked away and said, "Where's my wife?" "She's inside. Someone will push her out. I'll take a look at the child first. She'll be transferred to another ward later." The nurse held the child in her arms and looked at Oh Ming strangely. "Aren't you going to hold your daughter?" Okay. Oh Ming reached out his hand, but his eyes kept looking inside. "Can I go in and see my wife now?" "Wait a minute, why don't you hold your daughter first?" The nurse leaned over. "Do you want a wife instead of a child?" Oh Ming was a little embarrassed as he looked at the red-faced child in front of him. Soon, his eyes overflowed with a sincere smile. He hugged Zhang Xian carefully. "Be careful, the pregnant lady is coming out, make way." There was the sound of wheels being pushed. Oh Ming immediately looked away and saw Yu Lily on the delivery bed. He quickly walked toward her. "Wow, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" Oh Ming walked over with a glass of water. "Don't you like the name? Then Daddy will get another one." Chapter 1939. Oh Huijin came in with 2 thermos flasks. They looked very large. Xiao Ziqing was in front, her eyes fixed on her precious granddaughter. A smile bloomed on her face as she said, "Oh, you're so pretty. You look like Daddy and Mommy." Her little face turned even redder from crying, and her little hands and feet moved. She didn't have much strength, but Xiao Ziqing was even happier when she heard that. She said, "Hurry up and drink some soup. The child is going to be hungry." Oh Huijin placed the bowl on the table. Oh Ming went forward to open the lid and help his wife drink the soup. Yu Lily had no strength at all. She leaned against the side of the bed and didn't want to move. She said, "I have no appetite." "No, you have to drink some." Xiao Ziqing's tone was firm. She didn't allow any room for negotiation. Giving birth is like taking a trip to the gates of hell. If you don't drink some, it'll be troublesome if something happens to your body later. Be good and replenish your energy before you go back to sleep. You'll recover faster that way. Yu Lily pouted, but she still took the bowl of fish soup from Oh Ming's hands and took a sip. She didn't know if it was a psychological effect, but she didn't feel anything when she wasn't drinking. Now that she had a mouthful of soup, her stomach started to feel hungry. Xiao Ziqing glanced at it and said, "Eat some fish and other nutritious dishes. Mom, did you forget to add salt again? Yu Lily held the bowl. The more she drank, the more tasteless it became. It's so bland. You can't have salt. Xiao Ziqing carried the child. I'll get the nurse to ask for some milk. Hurry up and feed the baby some milk later. Yu Lily's face fell. Why don't I just feed the baby? Isn't breast milk the most nutritious? You have to be able to produce milk first. I'm afraid there's no milk now. Xiao Ziqing carried the baby and walked out. Nanny Zhang had already left work. Oh Huajin looked at the time and said, it's getting late. Oh Ming, stay here and take care of your wife. I'll get Auntie Qing to take care of her later. She'll stay in the hospital for a few days before going home to recuperate. Your mother's health isn't good. I'll take her home first. Oh Ming was speechless. Yu Lily drank the soup and nodded. Okay, then let Aunt Qing come here quickly. Dad, I don't think Oh Ming can handle it. I don't trust the special nurse. All right. Oh Huajin looked at Yu Lily and smiled kindly. Thank you for your hard work. Yu Lily was a little embarrassed and said, I'm a woman, let's go. Take care of your wife. Oh Huajin patted Oh Ming on the shoulder. You don't have to go to the company for now. If I can't handle it, I'll pass it to you. Dad, there are a lot of things you can't handle. Impudent. Oh Huajin glared at him, but he quickly chuckled. Sleep early. Good night, Dad. Yu Lily waved. You're in good spirits. A nurse walked in. How do you feel? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? The nurse did a simple check and left. Xiao Ziqing came back with the baby in her arms. However, the baby had already fallen asleep and seemed to have eaten his fill. I bought a breast pump. You can give the baby milk after you pump it out. Yes, Mom, Oh Ming said. Also, the special nurse will be here in a while, but you must take good care of the baby. I'll get Auntie Qing to come over as well. She'll be here later. Yes, Mom, Oh Ming said. By the way, Lily. Chapter 1940. This was the first time that Yu Lily and Oh Ming had become parents, so they were unfamiliar with many things. For example, changing the baby's diaper, feeding the baby, and waking the sleeping baby up to drink milk, everything seemed novel and inevitable. After staying in the hospital for 5 days, Yu Lily's condition was much better. After leaving the hospital and moving to her home, Yu Lily felt a lot more relaxed. The baby had always been sleepy. Apart from eating all day, he only slept. He spent very little time awake. At one point, Oh Ming thought that his child might be a fool. However, when he heard that it was normal for newborns to be sleepy, he was relieved. Yi Qianqian and Yu Lily hadn't seen each other for a long time. When she heard that they had a daughter, Yi Qianqian was very envious. She went to Oh Ming's house with Shinjilia and brought a lot of gifts. Yu Lily was still in her confinement period, so Oh Ming's mother was very strict and didn't allow Yu Lily to leave the room. Shinjilia couldn't see her at all, and Yi Qianqian was too embarrassed to enter their bedroom, so she simply played with the child in the living room. The newborn child was covered in a layer of pink, and her skin was so transparent that her blood vessels could be seen. Xiao Zhao's skin was very white, just like Yu Lily. She looked beautiful and obedient. Her eyelashes were long, and her eyes were closed as she slept. Yi Qianqian's heart was about to explode. She's so cute, old Shen. Look. Yi Qianqian hugged Xiao Xiao. She looks so much like Lily. Shinjilia glanced at the child's face, which obviously hadn't grown up yet, and asked, how can you tell? They both have 2 eyes, 2 noses, and 1 mouth. This small face was very young and tender. The features looked small, but when put together, there wasn't much recognition. Yes, they look alike. Look. Yi Qianqian looked left and right and confirmed. Look, they look like Oh Ming too. Look at the nose. Oh Ming's nose is very high, Shinjilia said. The nose hasn't grown out yet. How can you tell? Yi Qianqian glared at him and said, can't you have a little imagination? Look at the shape of the nose. It's so similar to him. The eyelashes are so long, so similar to Lily's. Look at the mouth. It's small and also like Lily's. Shenjilie replied, well, if you say so. Oh Ming stood to the side and watched them bicker. He snorted and came forward to carry his daughter back. He said, of course my daughter looks like me. It's said that daughters take after their fathers. I can't tell now, but when she grows up, she'll definitely be a beauty. You don't really look like a beauty. Shenjilie leaned back on the sofa. Lily, on the other hand, is quite pretty. Well, your future children can't look like you. Yi Qianqian is quite cute. If they look like you, they'll be ruined. Oh Ming didn't even raise his eyebrows as he teased his daughter. Don't you agree, Xiao Xiao? Yi Qianqian laughed and said, oh Ming, why don't you move Lily somewhere else? I'll go talk to Lily. Go in. It's fine. There's nothing to hide inside. Oh Ming glanced at her. Xiao Xiao was born less than a week ago. So, they can't have sex. Chapter 1941. Yu Lily had long known that Yi Qianqian was coming. Oh Ming came in to inform her. She even changed her clothes and combed her hair to make herself look clean and tidy. Unexpectedly, Yi Qianqian still hadn't shown up. She had just sat down on the bed in disappointment when she heard a knock on the door. Oh Ming had entered the room and made some noise, but he would never knock on the door. Only Yi Qianqian would knock on the door at this time. Yu Lily's eyes lit up, and she said, come in. Sure enough, the door opened. A head popped in. When Yi Qianqian saw Yu Lily, she smiled brightly. Qianqian, my God, you've become prettier. Yu Lily looked as if she had seen a ghost. She covered her mouth and said, you've lost a lot of weight. Yi Qianqian subconsciously touched her face and looked at her body. She said, no, it's just your imagination. How long has it been since you last saw me? It's true. You've lost weight. Yu Lily stepped forward and pinched her chin. You used to have 2 chins, but now, get lost. You're the one with 2 chins. Yi Qianqian slapped her hand away in annoyance. Yu Lily laughed and reached out to pinch Yi Qianqian's chest. Ouch, they've grown bigger. Yi Qianqian blushed and quickly closed the door. She covered her chest and said, are you done yet? Aren't you ashamed? TSK, TSK, TSK. Yu Lily stared at her. Why is your skin so thin? Oh no, it's all over. Love really makes people vulgar. You've changed. You're the vulgar one. You've changed. Yu Lily said with a pained expression. Shenjilie has trained you to be such a little woman. It's so scary. Why didn't I know he had such tricks up his sleeve? Yi Qianqian's face darkened. Why are you getting more and more shameless? You used to be more like a little woman than me, but now you're like a hooligan. How am I a hooligan? How did you lose so much weight? Did you lose weight? As Yu Lily spoke, she brought out a stool for her. Yi Qianqian sat down and shrugged. No. I just learned to keep fit from Shenjilie some time ago. I stopped eating snacks and started exercising. F***ck, this isn't considered losing weight? Yu Lily was envious and jealous. She pinched the flesh on her waist. Look at how fat I am. You're different. You've already given birth to a child. It's normal for you to be fat. If I want to have a child, I have to train my body a little better. Yi Qianqian was a little envious. Do you think fate really exists in this world? Of course. Yu Lily blurted out. When she saw the complicated expression on Yi Qianqian's face, she immediately corrected herself and said, for this kind of thing, it exists if you believe it, and it doesn't exist if you don't. Why do you ask? Did Shenjilia's grandmother read your fortune before? What did she say? Me? Yu Lily thought about it and said, she said that my fate before I was 25 years old wasn't very good. After that, my luck changed. I think it was quite accurate. Didn't she say that I might be infertile? Even the doctor said that the possibility of me getting pregnant wasn't very high. But when she read my fortune, she said that I would give birth to a son and a daughter. After the wedding, I found out that I was pregnant. Yu Lily shrugged her shoulders and looked at Yi Qianqian. Did the old lady read your fortune again? Yi Qianqian suddenly felt like crying. Yi Qianqian could be said to have seen Yu Lily's fate from the perspective of a bystander. Chapter 1942. It was so accurate that it made her hair stand on end. Sometimes, Yi Qianqian felt that she was overthinking things. But it turned out that it was better to believe in such things. One look at Yu Lily showed that it was true. When Yu Lily saw Yi Qianqian's expression, she knew. She asked curiously, what did she say? I sob. Yi Qianqian felt uncomfortable and said, she said that I might not live past 28 years old. That I'm short-lived. Yi Qianqian hadn't even told Yi Zhenhua about it. She was afraid that the old man would worry. Apart from Shenjilia, herself, and the blind uncle, only the Shen family knew about it. Now, Yu Lily was one more person who knew about it. Indeed, when Yu Lily heard that, her eyes widened and she said, no way. How is that possible? You don't look like someone who's short-lived. Yi Qianqian looked at her with grievance. What you think is useless. I think I'm doing very well. But, there seems to be a turning point in the future. She said that I might be infertile, or that I might die early, or something else. But, that kind of thing is probably not very accurate, right? Yu Lily coughed and said, yes, it's true if you believe it. If you don't, it's not true. Old Mrs. Shen is a bit like a fraud. I don't think it's very reliable. Yeah. Yi Qianqian agreed. I think so too. Under such circumstances, we can only wait and see. Anyway. I don't really believe it. You shouldn't believe it. Yu Lily glared at her. When are you getting married? Marriage. It's still early. March 5th, there's only a little more than a month left. It's not early. You have to be mentally prepared. Getting married is very tiring. I know. Yi Qianqian yawned. I'll take it one step at a time. I'm so tired. Why? Shenjilia didn't let you sleep? Yu Lily smiled ambiguously and gently touched her. Yi Qianqian blushed and said, are you going to die? How can you say anything now? It's nothing. We're all adults. Who doesn't know that? Yu Lily smiled. But, have you gone to the hospital for a checkup? Didn't they say you might be infertile? Didn't you go? I went to see a doctor. Everything is normal, but I can't get pregnant. Yi Qianqian rested her chin on her hand and was a little puzzled. I've always calculated the danger period and the safe period, but I still haven't gotten pregnant. No protection? No, Yi Qianqian still felt a little embarrassed to answer such a question. Her cheeks were slightly red. Yu Lily could tell what he was thinking. She laughed and said, your skin is getting thinner and thinner. Shenjilia is really something. His methods are really impressive. He's managed to train our tough girl to this extent. Yi Qianqian was speechless. But according to what you said, both of you are planning to get pregnant, and there's nothing wrong with your checkup. Could it be that Shenjilia? Yi Qianqian widened her eyes and looked at Yu Lily. She had never considered this possibility. Shenjilia would have a problem? Pooh. How could there be any problems when he was so energetic and lively, as if he couldn't wait to kill her in bed? However, doubt was like a seed. It was easy to implant, and slowly, it began to take root and sprout. After verbally denying the possibility, Yi Qianqian was a little distracted when she got home. Shenjilia finished cooking and called out, it's time to eat. I'm so sleepy. I can't take it anymore, I'll go to sleep first. Chapter 1943. After placing the last dish on the table, Shinjilia untied his apron. Yi Qianqian sat on the sofa. When she looked up, she saw Shinjilia carefully arranging the bowls and chopsticks. Good man, good man. But, ever since she had returned from Yu Lily's place, Yi Qianqian had felt that something was wrong. She had been with Shinjilia for a long time. Except for the time in the beginning, she had not deliberately used contraception. But even after such a long time, Yi Qianqian had not shown any signs of pregnancy. There was nothing wrong with her body. It had been checked. Then, the more Yi Qianqian thought about it, the more likely it seemed. She stood up and went to the kitchen to wash her hands. As she washed, she thought about how to tell Shinjilia. Shinjilia had already filled the bowl with rice. When he saw that she was a little distracted, he asked, "What's wrong?" Yi Qianqian quickly came back to her senses and said, "Nothing." Shinjilia sat down and placed a bowl of rice in front of her. "Are you in a bad mood? Did you get upset at Yu Lily's place today?" Yu Lily had given birth to a daughter, but they had not done anything. Yi Qianqian didn't know, but Shinjilia himself was quite upset. Yi Qianqian glanced at Shinjilia and pouted. "How could I be upset? I just feel that there is something. What is it? What is it?" Yi Qianqian didn't know either. But if she said it, would it affect Shinjilia's mood? But if she didn't say it, Yi Qianqian felt that it would affect her mood. Thinking about it, she felt a little depressed. Yi Qianqian didn't answer. Shinjilia frowned and asked, "What is it?" She quietly looked up at Shinjilia and found that he didn't look too good at the moment. He reminded her, "I feel that if I say it, it might affect your mood." It was rare for Yi Qianqian to be so hesitant. Shinjilia looked at her and didn't know whether to laugh or be annoyed. After a moment, he said, "Go ahead." Yi Qianqian picked up the bowl and took a bite. She chewed the rice in her mouth and whispered, "I'm thinking about the problem of the child." Shinjilia relaxed and said, "Huh?" Actually, he had already guessed it. Yi Qianqian had been unhappy and distracted ever since she returned from work in the afternoon. It was most likely because of this matter. It was expected. Shinjilia took a sip of soup and waited for Yi Qianqian to continue. Unexpectedly, Yi Qianqian widened her eyes and looked at him. She asked, "Didn't we go for a checkup earlier? There's nothing wrong with my body, right?" "Yeah," Shinjilia replied. It was as if he already knew what she wanted to say. Raising his eyes, he stared at her. Yi Qianqian felt as if she had been seen through. He coughed lightly and said, "Then, we haven't used any contraceptives for so long, and we still haven't gotten pregnant. I'm thinking, is there something wrong with your body?" Shinjilia paused in the act of eating and put the bowl down. The delicious soup in his mouth suddenly became unpleasant. Sure enough, it was a sentence that affected his mood. He put down the bowl and looked at Yi Qianqian. "Did you hear it from Lily?" Yi Qianqian smiled awkwardly and didn't reply. Chapter 1944. Yi Qianqian quietly lowered her head and drank the soup. She didn't dare to look at him. It seemed to be a very unkind thing to have such doubts about a man. "Then what did you answer?" Shinjilia stared at her with curiosity in his eyes. Yu Lily's imagination was even more wild than Yi Qianqian's. If Yi Qianqian hesitated or admitted it, then in her eyes, her man's dignity would be lost. Shinjilia felt a little bad. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she coughed softly and said, "How could I answer? I said it was impossible, and then Lily didn't say anything else." "Oh." Shinjilia nodded. Yi Qianqian felt even more uncomfortable and said, "I think we can go for a checkup or something. Do we need to?" Shinjilia stared at Yi Qianqian. A pair of amber eyes, especially scorching. Yi Qianqian was scared by his gaze. She looked away and said, "I think. Well, let's eat." Shinjilia had a strong feeling that if he let Yi Qianqian speak again, he would be even more upset. After eating, Yi Qianqian obediently went to wash the dishes. It was rare for a day when she didn't take the initiative to speak. She didn't even make a sound. Shenjilia sat on the luo and sent a message to Luo Ran. If a man is infertile, how do you treat it? I heard that Luo Ran has been a lot more obedient recently. It seems to be true. Luo Ran quickly replied. Luo Ran. Shenjilia, Luo Ran, you are infertile? Shenjilia, Luo Ran, F***ck, you didn't do anything outside, did you? Why are you infertile? Shenjilia, no, it's just that my woman hasn't been pregnant. She suspects that it's my problem. Luo Ran, Shenjilia saw the string of symbols and felt even more annoyed. He replied, tell me what to do. Luo Ran. Well, men generally don't have this kind of situation unless it's congenital. Did your father and brother have this kind of situation? Shenjilia subconsciously thought of Shen Luopen. Although he wasn't married, the number of women he had impregnated was indeed more than his. He replied, I don't think so. Luo Ran, that's right. Your brother is very experienced. Even he is fine. How could something happen to you? Shenjilia, Luo Ran, go to the hospital for a checkup. Didn't you say that your woman is fine? If it's really you, then your woman will be wronged. Ha 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 ha. Shenjilia, finding Luo Ran was the wrong decision. Shenjilia threw his phone on the sofa in frustration. Then, he saw that Yi Qianqian had already tidied up the kitchen. Shenjilia walked forward and saw Yi Qianqian walking out with her head lowered, not daring to look at him. Taking her hand, Shenjilia pressed her down onto the sofa. Yi Qianqian was shocked. Just as she was about to speak, she was forcefully suppressed. Today, Shenjilia seemed to want to prove something. He was fast and ruthless. Most importantly, it was very, very, very long. Yi Qianqian couldn't take it anymore. Panting, she called out, Shenji, let's go to the hospital together tomorrow. Shenjilia panted and leaned into her ear. Let's go have a look. Slow down. Yi Qianqian was sweating profusely and on the verge of tears. Chapter 1945. They went to the hospital early in the morning to register. Yi Qianqian sat by the side the entire time. Shenjilia's series of checkups took almost an hour. When he was well, he didn't look too good. They walked to the hospital's garage together. Shenjilia got into the car and said, there was a female nurse who took advantage of me just now. Yi Qianqian couldn't hold it in and burst out laughing. Shenjilia pursed his lips and glanced at her. It's true. Yi Qianqian quickly comforted him and said, all right. Don't be angry. You shameless nurse. It was a man. Yi Qianqian laughed even louder. Shenjilia glared at her, and Yi Qianqian stopped laughing. Shenjilia drove away unhappily. He was in a bad mood. Shenjilia pursed his lips and didn't say a word. He soon arrived home. It was rare for Shenjilia to be like this. Yi Qianqian followed behind him in silence. They went upstairs and returned home. As soon as Shenjilia entered the house, he went straight to the bathroom. After taking a shower, he saw Yi Qianqian sitting on the sofa and pounced on her. Yi Qianqian felt as if she was facing a formidable enemy. She immediately shouted, stop. Shenjilia didn't listen. He took off her clothes and said, men who are infertile will have sexual disorders. Oh, sexual disorders? That didn't exist. Yi Qianqian felt as if she had died and come back to life again. The day passed in a daze. When she woke up, Shenjilia wasn't by her side. When she walked out, he was sitting on the sofa, looking at the computer. It was dim, and the lights weren't on. Shenjilia was wearing a thin shirt and sitting cross-legged. Yi Qianqian walked over and hugged him from behind. Shenjilia's body was very cold, from his body to his face. He gently placed his big hand on the back of her hand and kissed it gently. Yi Qianqian glanced at his computer screen. There was a case on it. She could tell that it was the patient's information. Are you busy? Yi Qianqian's voice was very soft, but it broke the silence in the empty space. Yeah, Shinjilie replied in a low voice. Are you hungry? Let's go out to eat. I'm not hungry. Yi Qianqian felt a little guilty. She asked, do you want some noodles? I'll cook some noodles for you. You're going to make me eat noodles? Shinjilie glanced up at her. Yi Qianqian was taken aback. She blushed and said, cook noodles. Shinjilie chuckled and quickly replied, sure. Yi Qianqian released him and took out a coat from inside. She tossed it at him and said, you won't freeze to death. Put it on. The corners of Shinjilie's lips curled into a smile. He quickly put it on and seemed to have thought of something. He said, by the way, I'm going back to the capital tomorrow. Tomorrow? Yes, I'm going back to work. Shinjilie straightened his clothes. Come to the capital in 2 weeks. We'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Sure, Yi Qianqian replied without hesitation. Everything had been arranged. Just complete everything according to the schedule. As Yi Qianqian cooked the noodles, she suddenly felt like a married woman. The way she was now, could she be considered a good wife and loving mother? The two of them ate the noodles and slept in their clothes. During the day, he was restless. At night, Yi Qianqian was on high alert and refused to let him touch her again. Shinjilie laughed to himself, but he didn't make any more moves. The next day, when Yi Qianqian woke up, Shinjilie was already gone. Chapter 1946. When Yi Qianqian returned to the office, she was extremely busy. Within a few days, she received Shinjilie's checkup report. The report was simple. There were no problems. Everything was normal. The sperm survival rate was higher than that of a normal person. However, she couldn't conceive a child. When Yi Qianqian sent the picture to Shinjilie, he replied with a smiley emoji with a few words, this is fate. Sigh. This is fate. 2 weeks was neither long nor short. Yi Qianqian had already booked a ticket. When she got off the plane, Shinjilie was already waiting for her outside the airport. When she saw Shinjilie, Yi Qianqian almost pounced on him. She wrapped her arms around his waist and said with a smile, I'm here. Shinjilie's eyes were filled with affection. He held her in his arms and took her luggage. The two of them quickly went down to the garage. Have you eaten? I just had an airplane meal. It was terrible. Shinjilie smiled. If you're not hungry, let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau first and then find Mom and Dad for dinner. Yi Qianqian secretly clicked her tongue and said, that's so sudden. Have you arranged everything? Yeah. Grandma went to play with Grandma Dongfang recently. She won't be back for a while. Don't be afraid. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she relaxed a little and said, all right then. Let's go. Shinjilie had already made a reservation before he came. When he arrived, he didn't have to wait in line and went straight to get the certificate. When Yi Qianqian received the 2 red booklets, she still felt a little surreal. The marriage certificate was simple. On the red cover, the words, marriage certificate, were embossed in gold. There was only a thick piece of paper inside with their photos and names. But it was so simple that it felt like a dream. We're getting married? Yi Qianqian looked at Shinjilie. That's so sudden. Shinjilie raised his eyebrows slightly and pulled her into his arms. It's too late to regret it now. You're already mine. Yi Qianqian blushed slightly and whispered, I've always been. We have a certificate in the future. Your name is written on my household register. You can't run away. Shinjilie lowered his head and gently kissed her forehead. Let's go. Mom and Dad are waiting for us. When I see your parents later, what should I call them? Call me Daddy and Mommy. Call me whatever I call you. Shinjilie retrieved the car and started it. When they arrived, Yi Qianqian realized that there were quite a few people there. All kinds of relatives that she had seen and not seen before were gathered together. There were at least a dozen of them. Yi Qianqian felt a little uncomfortable and asked in a low voice, "Why are there so many people?" Grandma said that we should have a small celebration first and invite the others in March. On March 15th, we will go to Yuntown to celebrate again. Only then will the wedding be over. So many. Which one is the official one? The 5th of March. That's the best day. Shinjilia planted a gentle kiss on her cheek. The people around them who saw it were in an uproar. Yi Qianqian's face turned red, and she didn't speak for a long time. Shen Longyue and Mrs. Shen had been waiting for them for a long time. When they saw Yi Qianqian, they waved at her. "Qianqian, come and sit here." Yi Qianqian wanted to greet him, but she couldn't change the way she addressed him. After holding it in for a long time, he still couldn't utter a single word. Shinjilia could tell that and whispered, "It's okay. Take your time. Let's go over first." Okay. Chapter 1947. A simple family dinner was considered a simple and formal meeting gift between relatives. However, it was just a meeting. After the meal, Yi Qianqian followed Shinjilia back to the Shen residence. As soon as they entered the Shen residence, they heard the crying of a baby. Such a sound was particularly jarring in a family with no children at all. Yi Qianqian looked at Shinjilia and asked, "Where did the child come from?" The corners of Shinjilia's mouth turned up slightly, but he didn't answer immediately. He walked in with Yi Qianqian and immediately saw Nanny he holding the child and coaxing him. Yi Qianqian hadn't seen many children, but this child didn't look like he was just born. He was at least a month or two old. Yi Qianqian leaned forward and looked at him curiously. She asked, "Whose child is this?" "Nanny," he smiled and said, "Young master's child." Yi Qianqian was shocked and immediately understood. She looked at Shinjilia, who nodded at her and said, "You guessed right." Yi Qianqian gasped and said, "How could she agree to send the child over?" Shen Luo and was a jerk. As a husband and a man, Yi Qianqian didn't think he was a success. Could such a person really take care of a child? "Where is she?" Yi Qianqian asked. Shinjilia just glanced at her and said, "I don't know. My brother said she died." "How is that possible?" Yi Qianqian couldn't believe it, but at the same time, she felt a little sad. Shen Manting's fate was really not good. She met Shen Luo and an old Mrs. Shen, sigh. "I don't believe it either." Shinjilia sighed softly. "Do you want to hold the child?" Yi Qianqian wanted to hold the child, but she didn't dare to. It was Shen Manting's child. Shen Luo An's child. But after staring for a while, she couldn't help but reach out and take the child. The child couldn't stop crying. His little face was red from crying, and his voice was loud. "Is it a boy or a girl?" Yi Qianqian stared at the child and squeezed his little hand. Miraculously, the moment Yi Qianqian squeezed, the child's crying became a little softer. As if curious, he opened a pair of wet, dark eyes and stared at Yi Qianqian. "He's so pretty." Yi Qianqian looked at the baby in her arms, and a smile spread across her lips. "The boy's name is Xinyue Shao." Shinjilia looked at the child. "What do you think about the name Grandma gave him?" "That sounds good," Yi Qianqian exclaimed. "You mean beyond?" "Yes, Shao, who is brave and skilled in battle." "It's really not bad." "Did Grandma come up with this name?" "I don't know." Shinjilia stared at him. "The child was already here when I returned to the capital, but Sister Manting didn't come back." "You didn't see him?" "No." Shinjilia was a little self-deprecating. "My brother said she's dead." "Where can I find her?" Yi Qianqian was silent. She found it hard to believe. Shen Manting wouldn't die so easily, right? January 25th, sunny. During the new year, he came to visit me with more than a dozen bags of tonics. Without my permission, he entered the rented apartment without permission. I didn't dare to go home, and I got soaked in the rain. My stomach hurts, it's all because of this bastard. The 27th of January, rain. Her stomach hurt for a long time, but the baby still came out. It's a boy. It's said that children born during the new year have the best lives. They won't be at a disadvantage in terms of age. They'll live a full life. Fortunately, the baby is very healthy and didn't get sick because of my malnutrition. Chapter 1948. What is the purpose of a person's life? If she asked this question, perhaps no one would know the answer. Enchanting asked herself this question over and over again. What is the purpose of living? But after thinking about it for a long time, she still couldn't figure it out. But she didn't dare to die. She was like a gambler who had nothing left. She had risked everything, but in the end, she still lost everything. Originally, she wanted to give birth to the child and use it as a bargaining chip to threaten Shenluo. Even Enchanting herself didn't know what exactly she wanted to force him to do. However, the longer she got pregnant, the less she thought about it. As his belly grew bigger and bigger, his desire for this child grew stronger and stronger. When she saw Shenluo again, she suddenly realized that she had done something wrong. She shouldn't have kept the child in the first place. She thought that she would be cold to the end. The child was a bargaining chip and a means. But she didn't expect that in the end, it would become a shackle that tortured her. January 28th, there will be a thunderstorm. Baby, I was wrong. No one will take care of you, and no one will take care of me. I'm running out of money. The nurse said that they can't take care of you. I'm useless. I can't give you milk. I'm sorry that you're hungry. The weather is getting worse. I can't take it anymore. Enchanting lay on the hospital bed. Her face was pale. She stared at the soft tube that was constantly pumping water into her body. Suddenly, she smiled gently. The baby lay in the crook of her arm, sleeping peacefully and peacefully. But the pain in her lower body made her feel hopeless. Enchanting, it's time to eat. The nurse called out. Perhaps it was because her voice was too loud, or the thunder that sounded at the same time was too shocking. The baby in her arms suddenly twitched, then opened his mouth and cried. Enchanting felt a little weak. She gently patted the baby's back, slowly and gently. Enchanting endured the pain and sat up. She lifted the hem of her clothes and wanted to feed the baby. However, after the baby sucked on his soft lips a few times and realized that there was nothing there, he began to cry loudly again. The nurse rudely and impatiently put down the table. She placed the food on the table and went to call the next person. Zhang Chunhua. Hey, let me do it. In the same ward, a simple and honest man took the lunchbox from the nurse and said with a smile, "Thank you, nurse. You're beautiful and kind." "Thank you." The nurse's face looked much better. She silently handed over an extra egg. The man laughed even more happily and said, "Thank you, thank you." Then, holding the bowl of rice, he turned to his wife and said, "This nurse is really nice. Come, have an egg to feed our baby. A newborn baby needs nutrition the most." His gentle and honest voice was not pleasant to the ears. But at this time, it was enough to warm the heart of a woman who had just given birth to his child. Tears welled up in her eyes. She gritted her teeth and sat up, shielding the crying baby in her arms. After breaking the eggshell, he peeled it off bit by bit and slowly ate it. When a child cried, the other children in the ward were inevitably affected. Soon, the other child began to cry. A woman with a bad temper had given birth to her third child. Chapter 1949. His voice was full of resentment and harshness. She hugged her child and coaxed him. She murmured, "Good boy, don't cry. Wait for Daddy to come back and hold you." Enchanting was silent. She chewed the egg in her mouth and swallowed it slowly. But the boiled egg was too dry, and Enchanting almost choked. She forced herself to swallow it and reached for her glass of water. However, the water in the cup that she had asked the nurse to get was gone. She drank the last mouthful and finally felt a little better. However, the child in her arms was sobbing uncontrollably. When Enchanting saw her blushing face, she couldn't help but feel aggrieved. Tears welled up in her eyes. She raised her hand and slapped her little face. She shouted, "Be quiet." But the child in her arms did not calm down. Instead, he cried even harder. The other mothers in the ward looked over. Enchanting acted as if she didn't see it. She swallowed the last mouthful of the egg and then grabbed the chopsticks to eat the food in the lunchbox. It was terrible. It was really terrible. But Enchanting still took big mouthfuls of food. Her vision was blurred, and her throat was sore from choking. Enchanting's stomach was still not full after the last mouthful of food. She pulled the curtain up and directly lifted her clothes to feed the child. The child sucked a few mouthfuls and was quiet for a few seconds. But soon, he struggled and cried again. He took a deep breath and tears fell. Enchanting didn't say anything. She hugged the baby and gently coaxed him. After a while, she let him suck again. After she finally calmed the baby, Enchanting finally lay down exhausted. She closed her eyes and fell asleep with the child in her arms. Suddenly, Enchanting loosened her arms and trembled. Someone was stealing the child. As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, Enchanting's entire body tensed up. She opened her eyes abruptly and saw a man. A young man. His hand was reaching toward her arms as if he wanted to hold the child. "You're awake?" Enchanting's voice was very low, and she couldn't hear his emotions. Enchanting relaxed, but she immediately reached out and snatched the child back. Seeing that the baby was safe and sound, she stared at Enchanting vigilantly. Enchanting glanced at his watch and said, "Are you hungry? I'll buy you something to eat." "Wait for me." "I don't need you," Enchanting finally said. Her voice was hoarse from a prolonged drought. "I have food to eat." "Don't throw a tantrum with me," Enchanting said in a displeased tone. He turned around and walked out the door. When he came back, he was holding a thermos flask. He opened it, tested the temperature, and said, "Drink some water." Enchanting hadn't drunk water for a long time, and her mouth was extremely dry. Seeing the thermos flask, he subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. However, he couldn't do it no matter what. She turned her head away to avoid looking at him. She carefully placed the infant beside her. Enchanting's face tightened. "Are you trying to starve your child to death by not drinking water? When he wakes up, he won't even have a sip of milk. Isn't that pitiful?" Enchanting gulped again, averted her eyes, and extended her hand. The water temperature was just right. Enchanting drank so quickly that her throat hurt. But at least he had quenched his thirst. She handed the cup back to him, wiped her chin, and asked, "What do you want?" Chapter 1950. Everyone knew. Enchanting's heart was as clear as a mirror. But go back with him? She looked up at Enchanting. In her heart, there was only resistance. If she went back with him, what awaited her would be endless torture. She had finally managed to escape, and he wanted her to go back. Dream on. It's fine if you don't go back. Get discharged first. I'll hire a nanny to take care of you. Enchanting stood tall and looked down at her. "I want to see the child, but Julia brought his girlfriend home recently, and I can't get away." "Oh," Enchanting replied. "Then go take a photo." Enchanting looked at her with a sullen face and said, "It's best if you go back with me." "Do you think that's possible? I'm old. To be fair, I treat you well." "Yes, but someone treats me badly." Enchanting lowered her head. "Go. You don't have to worry about me and the child. This is my child. Don't you have any shame?" Enchanting glared at him angrily. "When did my child become your child?" Enchanting didn't lower her voice. Many people in the ward looked over Shen Luo and didn't seem to care and said, "If it's not my child, who did you have it with?" "The heir? I had it with someone else." Shen Manting clearly felt all kinds of gossipy gazes coming from around her. She was a little angry, but she quickly whispered, "I don't want to talk to you about this here. Go away." "Well, then I'll get you discharged." Shen Luo and turned and walked away as he spoke. Shen Manting was annoyed and said, "Shen Luo, and why are you so nosy?" However, Shen Luo and had already walked away as if he hadn't heard her. The other mothers in the ward looked at each other. Shen Manting clearly heard the mother in the next bed say to the mother in the other bed, "I thought she was pregnant before marriage. It turns out she has a man. That man is quite handsome. Why is he like this? He's also nice." He didn't wake her up. He stood there for a long time, but as soon as he woke up, he quarreled. Sigh, some people just don't know how lucky they are. If I had such a handsome man, I would die of laughter. Shen Manting felt like she was sitting on pins and needles. She looked at the child in her arms and wanted to get up. She hadn't urinated for a long time, and the moment she got up, she felt the urge to go to the toilet. He carried the child and got up, but as soon as he got off the bed, he felt his legs go soft. She almost fell. She held on to the edge of the bed to steady herself and walked to the bathroom. There was a tray in the toilet for mothers and children. Shen Manting placed the baby on it and went to the toilet herself before she came out. As soon as she came out, she saw Shen Luo An's anxious expression. Shen Luo An's expression softened when he saw her. He heaved a sigh of relief and said, "What's going on? Why did you bring your child to the toilet? What if I accidentally fall?" Shen Manting felt a pang in her heart. Hee, as expected, a man who doesn't love you has a strange focus. He was actually worried that she would drop the baby. She pursed her lips and walked towards her bed with the child in her arms. "Let me give you a hug." Shen Luo and looked at her pink face, and his heart was filled with desire. This was his first child. Chapter 1951. I've already gone through the discharge procedures. This bed is not yours anymore. Shen Luo and looked at her. "Which things are yours? I'll pack them up for you." Shen Manting's expression suddenly changed, and she roared, "What right do you have to do that? I'm the child's father. I have the right to take care of your body." Shen Luo and pulled her up. "How can you take care of your body here? Come back with me. Look at this ward. Which woman is thinner than you? How can you take care of the child if you're so thin?" Shen Manting didn't know if it was an illusion, but she heard some heartache in Shen Luo An's voice. She looked at Shen Luo An and saw that his face was unfriendly. He had lost a lot of weight compared to before. During this period of time, he had also experienced a lot of things. Shen Manting pursed her lips and didn't speak under the gazes of the gossipy people around her. Shen Luo An looked around and found nothing special. He said, "Buy whatever you need. Change your clothes. I brought you a set of clothes." As he spoke, he picked up 2 paper bags from the ground. Shen Manting saw that there was a bunch of flowers and a fruit basket on the ground. The flowers were beautiful and bright, and the fruit basket was beautiful and fresh. Shen Manting took the paper bag and saw that there was a down jacket inside. The color was beige, which used to be her favorite color. In the other bag was a slightly thin dress. She lifted it up and found clean underwear underneath. "I'll wait for you here." Shen Luo An sat down and reached out to pick up the child. However, Shen Manting didn't hand the child to him. She carried the 2 bags into the mother and baby's room and put the child down before she changed her clothes with peace of mind. She didn't dare to give the child to him. If Shen Luo An took the child away, she would really have nothing. After changing her clothes, Shen Manting glanced at her appearance in the mirror. Her face was sallow, and her overly thin cheeks were slightly sunken. Her hair was messy, and she didn't take care of it at all. She untied her loose ponytail and carefully tied up her hair. After wiping her face, she walked out with the child in her arms. The child had been sleeping as if he didn't feel hungry and slept carefreely. When she walked out, the other young mothers in the ward felt that Enchanting's body had a new look. So beautiful. Clothes make the man. Hey, why do you have to be so pretentious when you have such a good man? I thought you were a girl from some family who secretly came here to give birth. That's right, you're going home with your man. These clothes aren't cheap, right? They look really good. Envious voices and secretly jealous gazes. Enchanting accepted them one by one but didn't respond. Luo squatted down and took out a shoe box. He said, "Wear shoes. 37, right? I don't think I'm mistaken." "You're wrong." Enchanting lowered her head. "I'm wearing a 38. But he still stretched out his leg and stepped on it. He stuffed it in, but it didn't fit. She raised her eyes to look at Luo and an uncomfortable thought came to her mind. Yi Yu wore a 36, and she wore a 38. Luo probably couldn't remember who was who, so he bought a number in the middle. Thinking of this, his eyes were filled with mockery. However, she still hugged the baby tightly and refused to let go. "I want to eat." "Okay, let's go home first." Chapter 1952. Luo looked at her vigilant face and felt a little upset. After a moment of silence, he said, "I rented a small house nearby. We can stay there for the time being." Enchanting was slightly relieved when she heard that. "Well, let's go." Enchanting held the baby in her arms and walked forward. Luo looked at her back and moved his lips, but he didn't say anything. Although it was nearby, it was impossible to walk there. They took a taxi and sat in the back. The baby was very quiet. But when they reached the place, the baby suddenly struggled and cried. He opened his mouth and cried. Enchanting's heart ached when she heard it. She gently patted his little body and said, "Don't cry, don't cry. Mommy will take you to sleep." Her every movement was filled with the radiance of motherly love. Luo stared at this woman deeply, and there was a strange feeling in his heart. This was his sister and the mother of his child. This strange and magical relationship made Luo feel very complicated. They opened the door and walked in together. Enchanting found that this place had been lived before. But the furniture was relatively new, and there were fresh flowers on the table. Obviously, Luo lived here. Luo had always had a little habit. There needed to be fresh flowers in the room and in the office. It had nothing to do with aesthetics. Sometimes it could be roses and lilies, which were fragrant and beautiful, and sometimes it could be sunflowers or stars. Now, there was a calla lily on the table. Enchanting glanced at it, then sat down with the baby in her arms and lifted her clothes to feed the baby. Enchanting seemed a little embarrassed with her back to Luo. The baby stopped after a few breaths, then closed his eyes and continued to sleep. "Go to the room and change your clothes. I'll get you pajamas." Luo turned and went into the only room in the house. Enchanting looked around and found that there was indeed only one room. There was only one room. Did Luo want to sleep with her? She was shocked and stood up subconsciously. She wanted to leave with the baby in her arms. Enough. She had enough of that kind of life. Now that the baby was just born, she couldn't support him at all. Enchanting suddenly regretted it. I shouldn't have. She shouldn't have agreed to go with him at the hospital. Now, he had merely moved from the cage of the imperial capital to another cage. Her heart trembled, and she got up to open the door. When Luo walked out with a set of clean pajamas, he saw Enchanting trying to open the door. His face darkened, and he quickly stepped forward and roared, "It's already so late, what are you trying to do?" Enchanting froze when she heard that. Then, he opened the door and walked out. However, Luo was obviously faster. He stepped forward and grabbed her hand, saying, "Behave yourself." It's very windy outside. If you catch a cold and fall ill, I won't be the one suffering. Enchanting froze and turned to look at him. It was hard to imagine that Enrich was the one who had said those words. Enrich felt a little uncomfortable under her gaze. He pulled her inside and locked the door. He threw the pajamas to her and said, "Change your clothes and go rest. What do you want to eat? I'll go buy it for you." Chapter 1953. Enrich acted as if he didn't see her and pushed her into the room. "Where do you want to change?" Enchanting finally reacted. She glanced at the child in her arms and walked into the room with the pajamas in her hands. She locked the door and made sure that it couldn't be opened from the outside before she put the baby down. Enchanting looked around the room. The room was decorated very simply. She could tell that it had just been moved in. After changing into a new set of clothes, Enchanting found that the room was warm and cozy. She touched the wall and found that it wasn't cold. She lay down and found that the soft bed was very comfortable. Enchanting stretched her back comfortably. She was overcome by waves of sleepiness. She hadn't felt this way for a long time. She closed her eyes and fell asleep unknowingly. Enchanting didn't know how long she had slept and was awakened by a knock on the door. The baby was still asleep. Enchanting got up and suddenly remembered that she was no longer in the hospital. She opened the door and saw Enrich standing at the door. Seeing Enchanting's sleepy look, Enrich sighed and said, "Come out and eat." "I'm not hungry." Enchanting looked at him. "I just want to sleep." "Sleep after eating." Enrich pulled her up and looked down at her feet. "Put on your shoes." Enchanting glanced at it and turned around. She only saw a pair of shoes that she had just put on. Enrich saw it and walked into the room. He took out a pair of cotton shoes from a corner and threw them on the ground. "Put them on." Enchanting felt a little strange. After putting them on, she walked out obediently. Enrich threw a warm towel to her and said, "Wipe your hands." Then, he scooped her soup. The soup pot was a clay pot and seemed to be a little heavy. Did Enrich bring it back like this? The strange feeling in Enchanting's heart became stronger. She took a sip of the soup. It was Crucian carp soup. It was delicious and sweet. But it was a little hot. Enchanting couldn't help but take another sip and soon finished the bowl of soup. Looking at the empty bowl, Enchanting smacked her lips and felt a little unsatisfied. "Eat." Enrich glanced at her and said, "Don't eat too much." The rice pot was next to him. It seemed that Enrich had steamed the rice himself. "Did you make this soup?" Enchanting's instincts told her that it was impossible. Enrich was used to being pampered since he was a child. He had a nanny at home and was loved by his family. He had never had the chance to cook for himself. Sure enough, Enrich laughed when he heard this. "How is that possible?" "Oh." Enchanting felt relieved. Fortunately, if it was really made by Enrich, she was afraid that eating it would shorten her lifespan. Enrich looked at her. He didn't know whether he should explain or not, so he said, "I asked the aunt next door to do it. I told her that my wife had just given birth, so I hired her to take care of you for a month." Enchanting almost choked on her food. His wife? Enrich patted her on the back. She didn't know what he was feeling, but he continued, "She'll be officially taking you with her tomorrow." "How much money?" "Not much." Enchanting lowered her head and murmured, "I'll return it to you." Enrich's expression darkened again. He retracted his hand without saying a word. Enchanting didn't dare to speak. She picked up her chopsticks and ate without hesitation. The food was obviously made for pregnant women. There was little salt and oil, and it was very light. Chapter 1954. Enchanting hadn't had a full meal for a long time. The hospital fees were too expensive. She had been staying in the hospital since a few days before her due date. During this period of time, she had to scrimp and save to raise the child. Therefore, she didn't dare to eat or use good food. She had prepared herself for the worst. If she really couldn't afford to raise the child, she would find an old man to marry. No matter what, she had to keep the child alive first. She didn't expect Shen Luo to come. While eating, Enchanting suddenly felt a little sad. She lowered her head and drank the last mouthful of soup. She stood up and said, "I'm full. Call me when you're done. I'll wash the dishes. I'll go see the baby first." Shen Luo looked up and saw that Enchanting's eyes were a little red. He didn't say anything and watched Enchanting walk in. Enchanting wiped her eyes and then looked at her son. Although his facial features were not fully developed, it could be seen that he looked very much like Shen Luo. Enchanting gently squeezed his little hand and smiled slightly. "I bought milk powder and diapers. They're in the cabinet." Shen Luo's voice came in, followed by the sound of footsteps. "I'll be outside. Call me if you're busy." Shen Luo stood at the door and looked at her. "I know you're afraid of me. I'll sleep in the living room." Enchanting's heart seemed to be hit by a few simple words. An inexplicable feeling suddenly arose. Looking at Shen Luo, Enchanting nodded. Shen Luo stared at Enchanting for a long time. He wanted to say something, but he didn't. After looking at her for a while, he turned and walked out. He even closed the door behind him. Enchanting opened the cabinet and looked at it. It was full of paper diapers, all of which were of good brands. Her heart ached slightly, and she silently calculated the price. She opened the cabinet next to it, which was full of milk powder. The milk powder in the gold can was of a German brand. It was very expensive at first glance. Enchanting suddenly felt a little tempted. She couldn't afford to give him these things. But Shen Luo could. If the child were to live with Shen Luo, at the very least, the child would be able to eat and dress well. The child wouldn't have to be as strapped for money as she was. Moreover, Shen Luo and the old lady really wanted this child. Enchanting's eyes darkened as she looked at the little boy sleeping on the bed. Yes, they wanted this child. But he wouldn't want her. No matter how nicely they put it, it was just a means to take the child away. Once she handed over the child, what awaited her was probably a large sum of money. Or perhaps, it was Shen Luo's endless abuse and violation. He loved Yi Yuyu, yet he married Guan Kui. Yet, he spent every night with her. Shen Luo had never treated her as a human being. To him, she was just a tool to satisfy his lust. Now, Yi Yuyu was with Li Jinnan, and Guan Kui had committed suicide. Coincidentally, she was pregnant, so Shen Luo extended his evil claws to her. Enchanting instantly became alert and straightened up. Don't be fooled by him. Shen Luo was not a human being. She couldn't even believe that he would really treat the child well. Her heart was beating fast and heavy, and she suddenly felt lucky to have survived a disaster. She almost fell into the trap. Chapter 1955. The baby suddenly struggled and opened his mouth to cry. She touched his little butt and found that something was wrong, so she changed his diaper. She couldn't sleep until the middle of the night, when she finally fell asleep. The baby woke up a few times in the middle of the night. Enchanting didn't sleep well. The next day, she was woken up by a noise. She got up and opened the door. Shen Luo had just woken up. Did you sleep well? Shen Luo looked at her. It's time to eat. As Shen Luo spoke, his gaze shifted to her bed. Enchanting was a little wary. She blocked his view and nodded. I know. Shen Luo looked at her deeply and said, I want to see the baby. He's still asleep. Don't disturb him, Enchanting whispered as she blocked the door. Shen Luo seemed a little unhappy, but he didn't say anything. He turned around and left. After a while, Shen Manting walked out in her cotton shoes. Shen Luo looked up and was a little disappointed when he saw that she didn't come out with the baby. A middle-aged woman sitting next to her saw that Shen Manting was only wearing pajamas. She exclaimed, "How can you wear so little? What if you catch a cold?" "No, go put on a coat." As she spoke, she pushed Shen Luo and said, "Hurry up and get your wife some clothes." Shen Manting became alert and said, "No need. I'll get it myself. You're still in confinement. Don't walk around. Just sit here," the middle-aged woman said. Auntie rebuked, "Men are meant to be ordered around. You've already done it, so why are you asking your man to do it?" Shen Manting gritted her teeth and said, "But he's not, sit down." Shen Luo glanced at her. "I'll get it." As he spoke, he stood up and walked toward the room. He opened the door and took out a down jacket from yesterday. He couldn't help but stop in front of the bed. He squatted down and looked at the well-behaved and delicate baby. At first glance, the baby's features were so similar to his. Unconsciously, a sense of satisfaction arose in his heart. Shen Luo gently reached out his finger and touched the baby's little face. The baby was still sleeping and didn't feel anything. Shen Luo felt that his whole life was complete. He couldn't help but grin. Shen Manting waited outside for a long time. She had a bad feeling about this. Just as he was about to stand up, he heard footsteps coming from inside. Shen Luo came over with a down jacket and said, "Put this on." Then, she looked at the auntie and said, "Auntie Lin, it's time to eat." "Hey, you're here." Auntie Lin brought out the freshly cooked porridge and said, "A woman's vitality will be greatly damaged after giving birth. You must nourish yourself." Shen Manting couldn't help but poke her head out to take a look. At a glance, she saw an unknown piece of meat floating inside. Along with a few pieces of vegetables, the appearance was really a little embarrassing. However, it smelled pretty good. Aunt Lin served Shen Manting a bowl and said, "Here, try it." "What is this?" Shen Manting took a sniff but couldn't tell what it was. Auntie Lin did not say anything and said, "Try it first." Shen Manting took a sip and said, "It's sweet and fresh. Does it taste good?" Not bad." Aunt Lin smiled and said, "Eat more if you like it. Come, there's more in the pot." Shen Manting had a good appetite. She drank 2 bowls at once and said, "It's delicious." "What meat is this? It's quite smooth. Is it frog meat?" Chapter 1956. Snake, meat? When Shen Manting heard this word, she suddenly felt her stomach churn. She felt nauseous. She stood up and covered her mouth, wanting to leave. Aunt Lin immediately held her down and said, "Don't vomit. Snake meat is very nutritious. Come and drink some water." But Shen Manting couldn't control herself. Aunt Lin directly pressed her down and said, "You also think it's delicious. It's good for your health and milk. No matter what, you have to swallow it." Shen Manting looked at her uncomfortably, but when she heard Aunt Lin's words, she still forced herself to swallow it. Shen Manting took a sip of the water that was handed to her. After a while, she felt much better. But when she saw the porridge in the pot in front of her, she felt uncomfortable. The baby was crying inside. Shen Manting immediately got up and walked inside. When feeding, Shen Manting didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that the baby was eating better today. Did the 2 bowls of snake meat really work? She thought to herself, but she still felt very uncomfortable. No matter what, if she was asked to eat the snake meat again, she would definitely not eat it again. After the baby finished feeding, Shen Manting changed his diaper, and the baby fell asleep again. Shen Manting felt helpless and amused at the same time. She whispered, "Just like a little pig." Suddenly, she heard footsteps, followed by a knock on the door. There was no doubt that it was Shen Luo. "Can I come in?" "No." Shen Manting thought. "I want to see the baby." Hearing this, Shenmanting subconsciously looked at the little baby in her arms. This face was very similar to his. If Shen Luoan saw it, would he be more determined to keep the baby? Shenmanting was hesitating, but she heard the sound of the door being opened. Shen Luoan was wearing casual home clothes, and his angular temperament seemed to have softened a lot. He looked down at Shenmanting and said, "Are you asleep again?" She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she knew he was asking about the baby. But a pair of eyes were looking at her. Inexplicably, she suddenly felt her heart suddenly jump. The turbulent feeling came suddenly, and Shenmanting immediately lowered her head. She glanced at the sleeping baby and replied, "He's asleep." Shen Luoan walked forward and looked at the swaddle. "Can I hold him?" Shenmanting looked up and saw the desire and inquiry in his eyes. Shenmanting's heart fluttered, and she found it impossible to refuse. Shen Luoan. He seemed to have changed. She hesitated for a moment before pushing the child forward and saying, "Be careful. Don't hurt the baby." When Shen Luoan saw that she had agreed, he was overjoyed, and a sincere smile appeared on his face. She reached out with both hands and gently picked up the child. The fragrant smell of milk and the soft, warm swaddling clothes were in his arms. Shen Luoan felt his heartbeat quicken. It was very clear. His gaze swept across the child in his arms. Those eyebrows and those eyes were so similar to his own. Shen Luoan felt a sense of satisfaction that he hadn't felt for a long time. He asked, "Have you thought of a name for the baby?" Shenmanting wasn't in the mood to name the baby. She suddenly remembered when Shen Luoan mentioned it. She looked at the baby's pink and tender cheeks and shook her head gently. "Well, let me think." Chapter 1957. He's going to name the baby? Shenmanting was shocked. She suddenly felt annoyed that someone was coveting her things. She frowned and reached out her hand, saying, "Give me the baby." As she spoke, she took the baby in her arms. Shenmanting's voice was a little heavy. No matter how stupid Shen Luoan was, he could see that this woman was angry. Shen Luoan pursed his lips and frowned. Seeing Shenmanting's vigilant look, his good mood suddenly sank to the bottom. His gentle eyes became colder. "Shenmanting, what do you mean?" Shen Luoan's voice was not loud, but the anger hidden in it was obvious. Shenmanting heard this and shrank back. She looked up and saw Shen Luoan's angry face. She lowered her head and said coldly, "The baby is afraid of strangers. He will cry later." "Afraid of strangers?" Shen Luoan suddenly laughed. "You can make up a better excuse if you want to brush me off." "Afraid of strangers? He's only been born for a few days and you're telling me he's afraid of strangers?" Shenmanting did not speak but hugged the baby tighter in her arms. The baby was hers. The baby was hers. Even if he was the baby's biological father, she would not allow him to take him away. Shenmanting did not say these words out loud. She held the baby in her arms, but her heart was not at all confident. Shen Luoan's tone was not light, but Shenmanting's silence made him feel that it was meaningless. She gritted her teeth, stood up, and turned to leave. She closed the door, making a sound that was neither light nor heavy. The baby seemed to feel something, but it seemed that he did not notice anything. He pursed his lips, and then his breathing returned to normal. Looking at the closed door, Shenmanting's eyes were sore and her breathing stagnated. Her heart seemed to be hit hard by something. She looked up at the ceiling above her head. The room was quiet. February 1st, cloudy. "I don't know where Shen Luoan went, but Aunt Lin is still here to take care of me and the baby. I know that I must have angered him yesterday, and he did not come back last night. Thank God, I can finally take care of the baby and have a good night's sleep. I hope he forgets me and doesn't come again." February 8th, sunny. Shen Luoan left for a week and never came back. Thanks to Aunt Lin's care, I could feel my body getting better and better. The baby was awake more and more. Sometimes, he could open his eyes and look at me. He was very satisfied. Baby, mommy loves you. February 13th, rain. The baby was half a month old. Shen Luo and was back. He looked much thinner than before. He had dinner at home, but he didn't say a word to me. He just came to see the baby. She didn't offer to hug me, which made me feel strange. He went out again, and I had a feeling he was going to do something that would make me very uncomfortable. Hopefully, I'm just overthinking things. He finally thought of a name for the baby, Shenhua Xiao. Yu as in surpassing, Xiao as in ambitious and ruthless, surpassing ambitious and ruthless. Shen Manting closed her diary. Little Moon, who was sitting next to her, was staring at her with his beautiful, dark eyes. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and yawned. Her face was flushed, and she clenched her fists as she looked at Shen Manting's innocent and ignorant look. Shen Manting's lips curled into a smile. She picked up the infant and whispered, Shenhua Xiao, Shenhua Xiao. Do you like this name? Chapter 1958. Shen Manting's body stiffened and she turned her head to look. Shen Luo and was covered in dust. It was obvious that he had just come in. His eyes were a little red. He stood outside and looked in through the crack of the door. Shen Manting was shocked and reached out to close the door. However, Shen Luo and blocked the door and squeezed his way in. As soon as he came in, Shen Manting smelled the alcohol on him. After a sniff, Shen Manting was alarmed. She was shocked and shrank back with the child in her arms. She asked warily, "Did you drink?" Shen Luo narrowed his eyes and looked a little lazy. His eyes were very red. He looked at her with a pair of indescribable eyes. Shen Manting became more and more uneasy. She stepped back and said, "Get out of the way. The baby is still here." When Shen Luo heard this, he seemed to be a little sober and took a step back. He took off his coat and hung it up. Then, he walked over slowly. Shen Manting was shocked and unconsciously shrank to the corner of the wall. "What are you afraid of?" Shen Luo looked down at her with slightly red eyes. "I won't eat you." Shen Manting looked at him and frowned. "Which you? Which Xiao?" Shen Manting was stunned and couldn't react for a moment. "Didn't you name the baby?" Shen Manting was silent for a moment and answered, "Yes, Yu as in surpassing and Xiao as in ambitious." "Ambitious?" Shen Luo suddenly laughed. Shen Manting was bewildered by his laughter. She had no idea what he was laughing at. "This word is too fierce. You'd better change it." "Fierce?" "Yes." Shen Luo responded and moved his eyes to the child in Shen Manting's arms. "I asked Grandma to predict this child's fate." Hearing this, Shen Manting was shocked and then annoyed. "You're the one who has a bad life." Shen Luo glanced at her face and said in a low voice, "I don't believe it either, but Grandma said that his health may not be very good. If he follows you, he is very likely to die." "You're talking nonsense." Shen Manting was angry. "Don't try to lie to me. Even if you want this child, you have to make up a better reason." Shen Luo's face darkened, and he said, "If I wanted you to hand the child over to me, I would snatch him away directly. You wouldn't be able to do anything about it." Shen Manting's voice trailed off, and she gritted her teeth in silence. "Look at you now. You don't have money or power. The only thing you have is your face. Now that you've ruined it like this, what do you have to fight me with?" Shen Luo looked at her and said with contempt, "Look in the mirror. You don't even have the capital to sell yourself now." Shen Luo's words were too straightforward. His words stabbed straight into Shen Manting's heart, and her face instantly turned pale. "What, you can't accept it?" Shen Luo looked at her and smiled sarcastically. "I'm telling you the truth. Don't think too highly of yourself. If I didn't really want to take you back, do you really think I'd want to waste my time with you?" That was right. Shen Manting knew this better than anyone else. Shen Luo and was telling the truth. However, his tone was like he was humiliating a beggar who had nothing. Shen Manting gritted her teeth and sneered. So, you can't help it now, and you're angry out of shame? The smile on Shen Luo An's face darkened. He gritted his teeth and sneered, you? Haha. Shen Manting sneered, but she didn't say anything. Chapter 1959. Shen Manting. The words were squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth. Shen Luo An's eyes were bloodshot as he glared at her. She felt a chill run down her spine. However, after staring at him for a long time, he finally sneered. Shen Luo An was even more furious, and his grip on her hand tightened. Shen Manting closed her eyes and hugged the baby tighter. Seeing her like this, Shen Luo An suppressed his anger and flung his hand away in exasperation. I'm going to take a shower. I dare you to lock the door. With that, he kicked the door open and walked out. There were no lights on outside, so it was pitch black. Shen Manting immediately stood up, closed the door, and locked it. Shen Manting turned off the lights and lay on the bed with the child in her arms. Shen Luo An, who was outside, heard the commotion inside. The anger in his heart somehow dissipated. He stared at the darkness around him and took a deep breath. It seemed like a sigh, but it wasn't. Childish. Shen Luo An took a shower and took out the keys from the drawer. He opened the door and walked in. Shen Manting was breastfeeding the baby, and the lights were off in the room. Shen Manting was startled when she heard the door open. She looked up and saw that Shen Luo An had already turned on the lights. When he saw Shen Manting looking as if she had seen a ghost, he sneered and threw the key onto the bedside table. He took off his shoes, lifted the blanket, and was about to lie down. Shen Manting was even more shocked. She bounced up and roared, "What do you want to do? Let's sleep." Shen Luo An was not ashamed at all. He glanced outside and said, "It's cold outside. It's warmer inside." Shen Manting sucked on the baby's breasts, revealing his fair belly. Shen Luo An glanced at it and felt his body heat up. Feeling a little thirsty, he turned his head away and said, "If you're done, then go to sleep. I won't do anything to you." As he spoke, he had already laid down. Shen Manting tilted her body slightly and felt her hair stand on end. She looked at him and said, "Then you sleep here. I'll sleep somewhere else." His tone was filled with lingering fear, and his voice was trembling with unwillingness. Shen Luo An's face darkened. He got out of bed and locked the door. "Sleep here." Shen Manting felt as if her heart was being pierced, and she felt extremely uncomfortable. She gritted her teeth and looked at him. Then, she glanced at the infant. After standing there for a while, he felt a chill. The first month was definitely not a warm day. When the child was full of milk, Shen Manting couldn't take it anymore. It was very cold. "Give it to me." Shen Luo An reached out and glanced at Little Moon. She glanced at him, then sat down on the edge of the bed with the child in her arms. Shen Luo An didn't care. He reached out and took the baby in his arms. Shen Manting was shocked. Just as she was about to speak, she caught a glimpse of Shen Luo An's inexplicably happy face. For some strange reason, he loosened his grip and the baby was carried away. Little Moon had been born for more than half a month. This was the second time Shen Luo An had a child in his arms. Compared to the last time, the little doll was obviously heavier. Although the increase was not significant, Shen Luo An could clearly sense the changes. Shen Luo An's eyes crinkled, and his heart melted. He whispered, "Daddy's little darling." Shen Manting's heart fluttered, and it felt as if it had suddenly been squeezed. Shen Luo An's face was gentle, and he looked very much like an elegant gentleman. Chapter 1960. However, only his family knew what he really looked like. No, perhaps, only Shen Manting knew the true face of this man. Shen Luo and looked very gentle as he held the baby. He looked different from when he was facing her. He was playing with the baby, but the baby didn't respond at all. However, Shen Luo and didn't seem to feel bored at all. Instead, he looked very happy. Say something else. Shen Luo and suddenly said. Shen Manting was stunned and looked at him. What? Shen Yue Shao. Shao as in brave and good at fighting. Shen Luo and held the baby in his arms and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. He looked at Shen Manting and said, Shao as in ambitious and fierce. His tone sounded like he was asking for Shen Manting's opinion, but it didn't seem like it. For a moment, Shen Manting suddenly couldn't understand this man's attitude. Facing his gaze, Shen Manting had an indescribable feeling. She slightly avoided his gaze and then responded. Okay. Shen Luo An's expression softened and he said, go to sleep. It's getting late. He carefully placed the baby in the middle of the bed. The bed was very big. It was 2 meters long and was enough for 2 people to lie down. Shen Luo An fell asleep. She didn't know whether he did it intentionally or not, but his whole body shrank to the corner. Not to mention the distance between Shen Manting and the baby, there was still some distance between him and Shen Manting. Shen Manting's heart, which had been silent for a long time, suddenly jumped. Looking at him, Shen Luo An had already closed his eyes. Is he afraid of scaring me? After a long time, she got up and turned off the light. She lifted the quilt, lay down, and closed her eyes. However, the sleepiness just now seemed to be an illusion. Shen Manting couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard she tried. Her mind was full of Shen Luo An. He was clearly sleeping beside her, but he kept messing around in her mind. Shen Manting didn't know how long she kept her eyes open, but she felt sleepy again. However, the baby next to her suddenly moved, and then there was a small cry. Shen Manting reached out and gently patted the baby. She softly coaxed, Little Moon, be good. Don't cry. The baby really quieted down. Shen Manting yawned and closed her eyes. After sleeping for a few minutes, the baby woke up again. The moment she opened her mouth, she began to cry. Her small hands and feet flailed about restlessly. Shen Manting swept him over and tested his diaper. When she didn't find anything strange, she lifted his shirt and started breastfeeding him. Shen Manting kept her eyes closed throughout the entire process. Habitual and numb. However, he didn't seem to be impatient at all. Shen Luo An witnessed everything in the dark. He looked at her with a burning gaze. Shen Manting didn't notice anything. After feeding him milk, Shen Manting put down her clothes and soon fell into a deep sleep. Shen Luo An closed his eyes again, but he didn't sleep for long before the baby woke up again. It wasn't easy to raise a child. Shen Luo An finally experienced it. The baby woke up 5 or 6 times in one night. Every time Shen Manting woke up, she would either feed him or change his diaper. Every time he switched on the lights, his eyes would be blinded. Shen Manting felt an indescribable joy in her heart when she saw it. She unconsciously slowed down the process of changing the baby's diaper. Chapter 1961. Needless to say, Shen Manting slept even less than him. But his biological clock forced him to wake up at this time. Shen Luo An couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard he tried. It was 6:30 in the morning. Shen Manting was still asleep. Shen Luo An yawned, got up quietly, and went to the bathroom. He looked in the mirror and saw 2 dark circles under his eyes. What a mess. But he was so happy. He stared at the mirror for a long time and suddenly laughed. Are you crazy, Shen Luo An? He reached out and tapped the mirror, then washed up. Shen Manting slept until 9 o'clock. She reached out and touched the front, but it was empty. He opened his eyes abruptly and saw that the seat beside him had long since been empty. He quickly got up and ran outside barefoot. She saw the man sitting on the sofa. Shen Luo and was holding a diaper in his hand, and he didn't know what to do. The baby was placed next to him. His little butt was bare, and there was a thick cotton pad under him. Shen Manting's heart, which had been clenched tightly, suddenly relaxed. She quickly walked up and looked at Shen Luo and, saying, "The baby will catch a cold like this. But he's pooped. I have to change it." Shen Luo and frowned and handed the diaper to Shen Manting. Shen Manting saw it and took it. Shen Luo unconsciously moved away, and Shen Manting took his place. She looked at the baby and found that his little butt was clean. Shen Manting had an ominous premonition in her heart and asked, "What did you use to clean his wound?" "Wipe." Shen Luo An's face lit up with realization. "So that's what you usually do. What else?" Shen Manting was even more shocked. "Don't tell me you washed him directly in the water?" Shen Luo An heard this and suddenly felt a little guilty, but he didn't say anything. Shen Manting was annoyed and hit him with the clean diaper. "What if he catches a cold?" "Go away." She looked angry, then turned around and quickly put the diaper on the baby. Shen Manting's action was so rough that Shen Luo An couldn't react for a moment. In the blink of an eye, Shen Manting was busy. This feeling was a little strange. Shen Luo An actually thinks it's not bad? He looked at Shen Manting, who hadn't even washed up yet. His face was pale, and he looked extremely slovenly. In all fairness, this Shen Manting was uglier than any other state he had seen before. Inexplicably, Shen Luo An was in a good mood. Shen Manting quickly wrapped the baby up. Then, she quickly picked him up and said, "Don't bathe the baby in the future. It'll be troublesome if he catches a cold." Shen Luo An didn't reply. He looked at the baby in his arms. Shen Manting also realized that she might have been a little too fierce and said uncomfortably, "I'll go wash my face first." "Why isn't Aunt Lin here?" "I told her to rest today." Shen Luo An stood up. "What do you want to eat?" "I'll go buy it." Shen Manting asked, "Is the food outside edible?" The food sold in these small places is very dirty. "What does Aunt Lin usually do for you?" "Cooking porridge will take a long time." "How long?" "About an hour," Shen Manting said as she glanced at him. "Forget it. Go ahead and buy it. It'll take too long if you start cooking now." Chapter 1962. Shen Manting glanced at it and saw that it was a can of tonic. It belonged to the category of health supplements. The words on it were very conspicuous: postpartum supplement. In other words, it was specially bought for her. Shen Luo An handed it to her. He looked at her slightly absent-minded face and felt a sense of satisfaction in his heart. He turned around and said, "Wait for me to come back." After leaving these words, Shen Luo An opened the door and walked out. Shen Manting looked at his back and suddenly realized what was going on. She seemed to be more and more relaxed around him. February 14th, sunny. Shen Luo An seems to be different. He seems to be sincere to the child. But what should I do? The days passed peacefully, and Shen Manting slowly got used to Shen Luo An's existence. Shen Luo An seemed to be really different from before. At the very least, he didn't do anything out of line every single day he was here. It was another morning. When Shen Manting opened her eyes, she saw a large sleeping face. Shen Luo An gently placed his hand on her body and circled it around her and the baby. The baby's position was perfectly empty in the middle, and the baby was well protected. But even so, it still gave her a fright. Shen Manting subconsciously shrank back a little. This shrinkage not only woke Shen Luo An up, but also startled the baby. The baby moved a little, then opened his mouth and cried. Shen Manting quickly patted him, and after a while, the baby became quiet again. But when she looked up, she saw a pair of deep and hazy eyes. Shen Manting subconsciously held her breath and looked at him. "Morning," Shen Luo An said, then stretched and said, "It seems that Aunt Lin is here. I'll go and see." Shen Luo and never procrastinated when he got up. Enchanting looked at the other half of the bed in front of her, slightly absent-minded. His mind buzzed, and many questions popped up one after another. Why did he sleep with me in his arms? More importantly, she didn't feel it at all. The ominous feeling in her heart grew stronger, and Enchanting was a little annoyed. Shen Luo invaded her world day by day, and she had slowly become used to him. However, it was impossible for Shen Luo to have the patience to play house with her and play the role of the husband of this nameless family of 3. His target was definitely the baby. Once she let her guard down, he could snatch the child away, right? The more he thought about it, the more terrifying it was. Enchanting broke out in a cold sweat because of her own thoughts. This situation was too terrifying. However, he had to be on guard. Shen Luo could really do such a thing. Enchanting also got up to wash up, but she looked a little absent-minded. When he came out, the baby had already been carried out. Shen Luo sat on the sofa and fed the baby. The baby held the bottle with both hands and sucked contentedly. The feeling in Enchanting's heart suddenly became stronger. She looked at them, walked over, and said, "Let me do it." However, Shen Luo was unwilling to do so. He said, "There's no need for that. Go and have breakfast first. I'll take your turn later." He had a silly smile on his face. Enchanting hesitated for a moment but didn't say anything. She turned around to eat breakfast. Suddenly, Shen Luo, who was sitting on the sofa, laughed and said, "Look, our son is smiling at me." Chapter 1963. He didn't notice that Enchanting's body stiffened slightly when he said, "Our son." Shen Luo walked over with the baby in his arms and crouched down. But soon, there was a look of regret on his face and he said, "He's not smiling anymore." Aunt Lin heard this and was amused. She rebuked, "How can such a small baby know how to smile? He'll smile with you when he grows up." Enchanting glanced at him and her body tensed up. The strange feeling in her heart magnified and got out of hand. But Shen Luo didn't notice it. He held the baby with a look of regret on his face. He seemed to notice that Enchanting was looking at him, and he looked up at her. Enchanting looked at him and quickly looked away. She said, "Do you want to eat? You eat first. I'll hold the baby." Shen Luo sat down next to her with the baby in his arms and said, "Have you noticed that the baby has become more and more good-looking recently? Look at his face. It's much rounder." Aunt Lin looked a little proud and said, "Of course. Mom has good food and drinks, and the baby has enough nutrition. Of course, he's become good-looking." Shen Luo grinned and said, "That's true. I'll give you a bonus later." The smile on Aunt Lin's face blossomed as she said, "Thank you, sir." Everything seemed to be harmonious. Enchanting's heart, which she had finally calmed down in the morning, suddenly began to waver again. February 28th, sunny. Her confinement was finally over. She couldn't wait to take a shower, wash her hair, and change into new clothes. She felt that she finally looked like a human. Ha ha ha. I'm going to take a walk on the street. I'm going to take little Moon out to bask in the sun. The outside world, here I come. Shen Luo especially bought a small cart, but Enchanting didn't feel comfortable leaving the baby alone in the cart, so the cart was fortunately left unused. It was the first time Enchanting took the baby out, so she didn't dare to go far. The sun was not small outside, but because it was early spring, it wasn't so hot. The baby opened his eyes and habitually frowned under the sun. He frowned slightly and thought of Shen Luo's unhappy look. Enchanting held the little guy in her arms and smiled. Shen Luo reached out a hand to cover the baby's face and said, "Don't get sunburned." "I'm covering you," Enchanting said with a smile as she arched her body slightly to shield the infant from the sun. "Little Moon's skin is tender. It'll be terrible if he gets sunburned." Enchanting glared at him angrily and said, "The sun is so strong. Who will die from the heat?" Why don't you use an umbrella? Wait for me. I'll go buy an umbrella, Shenluo and said before disappearing. Soon he came back with an umbrella in his hand. It was still spring, and the weather had been a little humid recently. The sunlight in Jiangnan was not that strong. However, Shenluo and's concern for the baby left her speechless. Under the curious gazes of the passers-by, he finally walked a full circle. Enchanting was in a much better mood. For the past month, he had been cooped up in a small room all day. He was bored to death. But because the infant couldn't be left outside for too long, Enchanting still carried him home. Aunt Lin had already prepared lunch. When she saw them return, she said, "You're back. You can eat now." Chapter 1964. The baby was very obedient. Enchanting washed her hands, scooped some rice, and sat down. Shenluo and did the same. He quickly sat down beside her. Delicious dishes were placed in front of them. The two of them sat next to each other, but Enchanting did not move away. Even Enchanting didn't realize that she had become more and more tolerant of Shenluo and over the past month. Shenluo and glanced at her and smiled. "That, sir," Aunt Lin wiped her hands with her apron. There was already a thin layer of sweat on her face. When he spoke, Enchanting and Shenluo and looked at him. Aunt Lin looked a little apologetic and said, "You see, Manting is out of confinement now. I promised to take care of her until then. I won't be coming tomorrow." Enchanting was shocked and asked, "Why are you in such a hurry?" "Yes." Aunt Lin looked apologetic. "My daughter is about to give birth. She has been nagging me for the past few days." Shenluo and frowned. Enchanting also felt that it was a little sudden. Aunt Lin's cooking was good, and she was kind. Most importantly, she was attentive. For the past month, she had been teaching him. His mother was supposed to do all the postpartum chores, but Aunt Lin did it all. There was no doubt that Enchanting was reluctant to tell them that she was leaving. Seeing their reaction, Auntie Lin said, "I agreed to work for a month, not only because Sir offered a high salary, but also because it's a suitable time for my daughter." "Aren't you going back to the capital?" "Why don't I help you go back to the capital? Just in a few days. What do you think? Back to the imperial capital?" Enchanting's heart skipped a beat and she subconsciously glanced at Shenluo and Shenluo and didn't seem surprised at all. He nodded and said, "All right. Thank you for all this time, Aunt Lin." Aunt Lin finally heaved a sigh of relief and said, Of course, of course." Soon, Aunt Lin left. After he left, no matter how delicious the food was, Enchanting felt that it was tasteless. Back to the imperial capital? She was not going back. However, Shenluo and was from the capital. Over the past month, other than going back a few times, he spent most of his time here. He couldn't stay in Jiangnan for the rest of his life, right? Enchanting felt vexed. It was supposed to be a happy day, but why couldn't he be happy? "If you don't want to go back, you can wait." Shenluo and said, "The baby is a month old. I've already told my parents about the registration. Register me in your household register." Enchanting looked at him with a reluctant expression on her face. Shenluo and put down his chopsticks and said, "My parents and grandma are looking forward to seeing little Moon. Ever since the baby was born, they've said more than once that they wanted to visit you and their grandson." Enchanting's expression darkened. "But I was afraid that you wouldn't agree, and I didn't want to scare you, so I didn't let them come." Shenluo and looked at her. "They're old. This is their first grandchild." "I'm not young either," Enchanting said in a low voice. "This is my first child. You're also my first." Shenluo and's gaze softened. "Manting, come back with me." "Go back?" Enchanting sneered. "Like a parasite, I'll be imprisoned and raped by you?" Enchanting's eyes had turned red, and her eyes were filled with obvious hatred. Chapter 1965. Really? Enchanting slammed her chopsticks on the table. Is this how you talk to me nicely? Enchanting glanced at the chopsticks she had slammed down and said with a sullen face, do you have to talk to me like this? Her anger quickly spread. Enchanting's whole body seemed to be stained with cold air as he glared at her. Enchanting looked at Enchanting and naturally thought of the man in front of her as the Enchanting who used to treat her like an ant and a sex slave. She sneered and said sarcastically, yes, this is Enchanting. Enchanting narrowed his eyes and asked, what do you mean? You've been pretending for a month. Are you tired? Enchanting stood up and turned to leave. Enchanting grabbed her hand and gritted his teeth. No matter what your choice is, I'm going to have the child. I've been here for so long not to play house with you. Enchanting felt a stab in her heart. She swung her hand back with a cold face. Enchanting's grip on her hand tightened. You've finally shown your true colors, haven't you? Enchanting gritted her teeth and looked at him with red eyes. You can't pretend anymore, can you? You've finally shown your true colors, haven't you? In fact, you've been here for so long for Little Moon, for your son. Her voice was not soft and woke up Little Moon, who was sleeping soundly. The baby moved a little and then cried childishly. Enchanting glanced in the direction of the baby and then threw her away. Be polite. I've been with the child and you for the past month. Ha! Enchanting took a step back. You make it sound so good. Do you think I'll believe you? Enchanting suppressed his anger and clenched his fists tightly. He walked up to her step by step and said, I'm not staying just for the sake of the child. If you're willing, I can marry you. Go to hell. Enchanting roared and instantly erected all the barbs on her body like a hedgehog. I'd rather marry a dog than marry you. You're a pervert who raped and humiliated your own sister. Enchanting gritted his teeth and roared, are you done? You know we have nothing to do with each other. Yes, it doesn't matter, Enchanting said with a laugh. That's why you could lock me up for so long and rape me every day without feeling guilty. That period of time was comparable to hell. She was almost blinded by Enchanting during this period of time. But Enchanting was Enchanting. With just a little provocation from her, he revealed his true colors. Everything that had been laid out was just for the sake of this child. The corners of her lips twitched, and her vision blurred. Droplets of water rolled down her cheeks. Her heart felt like it had been drilled through a hole. She chuckled softly, that's why I have him. His finger pointed at the child. No one knows better than you how that little bastard came to be, brother. Bastard. Enchanting's hair stood on end when he heard such a sensitive word from her mouth. He looked at Enchanting in disbelief, as if he was looking at a lunatic. But the last word, brother, was a resounding slap on Enchanting's face. The baby cried even louder, as if it was crying out its mother's ruthless contempt. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.